Welcome to Mick's ACL Hot Minute, episode 1. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's a new format that I'm trialing this year instead of the written blogs and written research reviews. So, yeah, let me know if you like this format or not. Yeah, leave me a comment, send me an email, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, I just want to see what you guys are enjoying on the ACL Hub and what you're liking and what you're learning. And hopefully this new format sits well with you. So, this is a brand new paper published in the Journal of Orthopedic Sports Physical Therapy journal, led by the author of KOC, and colleagues. It was published just this month, so it's hot off the press. And the title of the paper is called "Low Load Blood Flow Restriction Training as an Alternative to Heavy Load Resistance Training in Early Stage Rehab Following Bone Patella Tendon Bone ACL Reconstruction, a randomized control trial." So absolute mouthful. But basically, the authors compared low load blood flow restriction training versus traditional heavy load resistance training in the early phases of rehab after ACL reconstruction in those that had a patella tendon autograft. They started with 28 participants, so 14 in each group. The average age was about 20 in each group, with half of both groups being male, and average BMI being about 23 to 24. So young, mostly male, fairly fit and healthy. They were very sporty too, population with a Tegner activity score of 7 to 8, which puts them in a really high level of physical activity and sport demands prior to injury and prior to surgery. So rehab started early. So we're talking strength training beginning at week 2 post-op, but only once they met sensible criteria, being a quiet knee effectively. So 0 to 90 degrees range of movement, minimal swelling, and they could do a straight leg raise without an extension lag. The intervention for both groups ran over a 12-week total. Both groups trained under supervision of a physical therapist twice a week over that 12 weeks. So they both roughly got 24 sessions per group over the course of time. Now, what did both groups do? So both groups performed the same trunk exercises. So they did leg and trunk exercises that were the same. So they did leg press, leg extension, squats, and deadlifts. But the difference between the groups was the load and the method. So the blood flow restriction group used low load training with the blood flow restriction. So 30% of 1 RM in sets of 4 sets in total. So first set being 30, and then the second, third, and fourth sets of blood flow restriction being 15 reps. So pretty classic routine for blood flow restriction at an occlusion pressure of 80%. The heavy group, however, trained at 70% of 1 RM for our more traditional 3 sets of 10 programming for those exercises, as I mentioned before, leg press, leg extension, and so on. The big outcome measures, or the main outcome measures they were looking at, were isokinetic strength differences over time, plus pain, swelling, and range of movement. And strength was assessed preoperatively and then again at 14 weeks post-surgery, which is at the end of the intervention. Big headlines here from the paper, and here are the key results. At the end, there were no differences between the groups. So if you had low load blood flow restriction or if you had the heavy resistance training, both groups improved over that 12-week intervention period, regardless of which one. So one wasn't superior to the other. Low load blood flow restriction produced similar quads and hamstring strength outcomes at this early time point. So yeah, basically a finding here that whatever intervention the person can tolerate, we go for. If the person can't deal with load early, and every person will run their own race and every person will have different experiences, if they can't tolerate load, then blood flow restriction training is a beautiful, beautiful way to get that load into their knee, to give them an appropriate stimulus to get their rehab started. If, however, they can tolerate load, then we go with that heavy resistance training. And ultimately, someone that can accept load better and tolerate 70% 1 RM loads better, in my experience, will end up sort of running a much smoother path, because they can tolerate a true environment rather than effectively stimulate their leg in a almost like false environment with the low blood flow restriction training. So that was probably the takeaways for me. Hamstrings also too were able to be maintained nicely over the course of the intervention period too. Both groups ultimately got better over the 12-week window. Their quads and hamstrings both improved, but there were no differences between the groups. Also, when it came to pain and swelling and range of movement, Once again, no differences between the groups, and both groups got better over the 12-week window. Clinical takeaways for me, I mean, what are we going to do with this information? It's really clear that if you've got an early phase early phase bone patella tendon bone patient, and heavy loading isn't tolerated, as I mentioned, blood flow restriction at 80% occlusion is a really sensible way to get their rehab started. But if they can tolerate the 70% 1RM loading, then we start there. The challenge is for us to determine who can start and who. So it's a bit of trial and error to begin with. I would start if the person meets those quiet knee criteria. I would start with heavy. If they, after a couple of sessions, they start to get a poor response in that they start to get sore or swollen, then we can revert back to a blood flow restriction training. But I wouldn't start with blood flow restriction first for a few different reasons, but I would want them to get that true stimulus in early. So I'd give them at least a week of exposure of a heavy resistance training program to see if we can weather that early discomfort. If they can get through that first week, then we keep on going. But if they can't tolerate it, and if after a week they're getting sore, they're getting more swollen, they can't get around very well, then I'd switch gears and go to blood flow restriction training. So you have it. Episode, I know that was way over a minute, but that's okay. Hopefully this gives you enough information and little bite-sized chunks that will help you navigate the ACL rehab space. This paper is an open access full text article. So if you want to dive a bit deeper into the parameters of the paper and a bit more of the detail, it's at the link in this blog below. So tell your friends, tell me what you like, what you don't like. Enjoyed this first edition of Mick's ACL Hot Minute. Can't wait to bring you more in the future. Until next time, we'll see you then.